The first movie turned a ridiculously simple premise into a surprisingly effective anxiety machine by trapping two women on top of a 2,000-foot radio tower and forcing the audience to sit there with them, sweating through every gust of wind, every dying phone battery, every crumbling bolt, and every bad decision. And honestly, that may be exactly why Deadpoint has a shot at being more than just the sequel where they do the same thing again. No shelter, no easy escape, nowhere to hide, nowhere to rest, and nowhere for the camera to let you breathe. The sequel seems to understand that perfectly. Instead of repeating the tower beat for beat, it takes the real core of the first film and moves it into a new environment that may be even crueler. Quan Mountain is not just high. It feels hostile. Jagged cliffs, unstable pathways, thin air, decaying gear, and a suspended wooden route that looks like it was designed by a sadist. That is a good sequel instinct. It is not changing the genre. It is identifying what made the first movie work and then finding a new way to make that same fear feel even worse. That is exactly what this trailer sells. From the very first images, the movie understands the power of vertical dread. The mountain is not just a location. It is the villain before the villain. The trailer practically dares you to keep watching, then starts listing the physical consequences of altitude like it is reading out a death sentence. Reduced oxygen, rising heart rate, panic, dehydration, confusion, hallucinations, fear. That is smart because it makes the threat feel both cinematic and biological. You are not just worried about falling. You are worried about the body itself turning against the characters while they are suspended in a place where one mistake ends everything. That kind of detail gives the trailer something the first film leaned on a little less effectively, a stronger sense that survival is being attacked from multiple directions at once. Harriet Slater's Jax immediately gives the sequel a personal angle that helps it feel like more than just a random new batch of climbers in trouble. Because of her connection to Shiloh, this climb does not feel like some empty thrill-seeker stunt. It is framed as memorial, grief ritual, and reckless self-punishment all at once. That is a strong emotional engine for a survival thriller because the audience can already sense that this is not just about getting back down. This is about what grief convinces people to do when they mistake danger for meaning. Jax is not simply climbing a mountain. She is walking into an emotional trap that happens to also be a physical one. That gives the movie more dramatic fuel than the first film had at the start, because the danger is not just external. It is tied directly to why she is there in the first place. Arsema Luce also looks like a smart addition because the trailer positions her as fearless enough to make the mission possible, but not so invincible that the tension disappears. The chemistry between survival thriller partners matters a lot in a movie like this. If one person is obviously the stronger, smarter, calmer half of the pair, the dynamic can become predictable. What the trailer suggests instead is that both women are vulnerable in different ways. That is better. It creates a situation where the film can shift the burden of control from one to the other depending on who is injured, panicking, hanging, slipping, or losing grip. Once Luce goes over the edge and starts dangling beneath the rotting bridge, the movie seems to fully commit to that balance of power panic. Nobody is safe, nobody is fully prepared, and nobody gets to function as the comforting this person will fix everything presence. That is exactly how you want this kind of movie to work. What also jumps out to me is how much more openly set-piece driven the sequel looks. The first fall movie got a lot out of limitation. That was part of its charm. It felt like filmmakers squeezing maximum discomfort out of a contained premise and a very small budget. Deadpoint still looks economical, but the imagery feels bigger, broader, and more designed around escalation. The rope bridge alone is a great sequel image because it instantly communicates fragility, distance, exposure, and the possibility of total disaster in one shot. You look at that poster or that trailer footage and your brain already starts inventing ways it can all go wrong. That is what good survival marketing does. It turns the environment itself into suspense before the plot even catches up, and the environment here looks absolutely vicious. There is also something smart about the film shifting from a tower to a route. A tower is vertical prison. A dangerous mountain crossing is moving prison. That matters because it gives the sequel more visual variety and more opportunities to destroy hope in stages. In the first film, survival was often about holding out. Here, survival looks like it may be about progressing through increasingly worse terrain while every possible aid gets stripped away. The trailer hints at destroyed routes, lost support, unstable platforms, and the sheer cruelty of having to keep going even after the plan is already dead. That is a stronger engine for escalation, because each section of the climb can become its own nightmare instead of the movie relying on repeated reminders that the drop is scary. The drop is still scary, obviously, but now the film seems to understand that movement can make fear more dynamic. The franchise angle is also more interesting than I expected. Turning Fall into a series sounded risky at first because the original worked partly because it was so brutally simple. Once you start sequelizing something that narrow, the danger is always that it becomes silly. But Deadpoint may actually be proving there is a sustainable formula here, as long as the filmmakers keep translating the same central fear into different high-altitude death traps. If that is the plan, this series could become a kind of modern survival brand where every movie takes the audience to a new place with the same cruel question: how long can you function when nature, height, panic, and grief all decide to kill you at the same time? That is a better franchise hook than I expected from this property. The Michael and Peter Spierig factor also makes me more curious. These are filmmakers who usually know how to handle nasty pressure, pulpy tension, and high-concept danger. Their style should fit this material well, especially if the goal is to push the sequel toward something slightly more intense and visually ambitious without losing the immediate physical panic that made the first film memorable. Add in the script connection to original creators Scott Mann and Jonathan Frank, and it becomes easier to see why this still feels like Fall instead of a totally disconnected survival knockoff wearing the name. More than anything, though, the trailer understands that people are coming here for a very specific kind of suffering. Not emotional devastation alone. Not creature feature thrills. Not mystery box plotting. They are coming to feel sick. To grip the armrest. To yell at the screen. To imagine their own hands slipping off what would or frayed rope.